Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Two Sons Podcast. I am your co-host here, Philip, and in today's episode is going to be another quick solo episode, just me, myself, and I, and we will be continuing our journey through House of the Dragon Season 2, and we are going to be covering Episode 2. And I'm going to be giving you my reactions and thoughts and rundown of the episode. So expect it to be a little bit of a shorter episode, but nonetheless, we are back with some more House of the Dragon. By the time I'm recording this on Sunday, episode 3 will be coming out in roughly about an hour and a half. So I'll be able to enjoy that tonight. But yeah, I mean, without further ado, we're going to jump into our episode. So my brother is taking another week off. He just started a new job recently, and it was a very like hard and stressful week for him. So I thought I'd just step in and continue my mini series on House of the Dragon and give him some time to like rest and relax. So if you guys are disappointed, we're sorry about that. Obviously, things come up. I don't want to stress him out. He recently just did celebrate his birthday on Saturday, so everybody drop your happy birthday comments in the comment sections down below and wish him a happy belated birthday on all of our socials and platforms and whatnot. But like I said, you guys seem to really enjoy the first episode of like my little mini series on House of the Dragon. It did really well on YouTube. It hasn't been posted to Spotify yet, so apologies for anybody that listens to us audio wise on Spotify. So if you want to listen to it, you're probably better off going on YouTube for now. And my brother will upload it as fast as he possibly can. But yeah, so check out the episode on YouTube. Last week we went over episode 1 of season 2 of the House of the Dragon. And like I said, in today's episode, we're going to continue that trend by discussing the second episode in our little lovely mini series here. So before we continue, I thought I'd let you guys know how I am doing and what is going on with me, myself, and I. So I'm doing okay. I could be a little bit better. I'm still going through some of my medical problems that we talked about a little bit last week. I would like to think that they are improving and I am doing a little bit better, but some days it just doesn't feel like that, and today is one of those days. So I'm just really praying that, things start to turn around eventually and I see some changes soon because I would really love to feel like, 100% again. So, but other than that, work is going really well. I was actually recently just offered a promotion. So your boy might be going from a key holder to a possible manager. So that'll be really exciting, seeing if that's going to take place. And when I have more details and stuff for you guys, I will definitely share. But yeah, things might be looking up job wise, so that is really fun and exciting, of course. And other than that, like I said, I'm just trying to take it easy, relax, day by day. My mom is coming down to visit on July 4th, so she'll be down here on Thursday. And excuse me. Oh, excuse me. She will be coming down to visit for 2 weeks on July 4th. So I will see her in a couple of days, which I'm looking forward to. Hopefully we can relax and spend some time together and whatnot. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Uh, but other than that, like I said, same old, just grinding along and just, waking up every day and doing what I gotta do. So hopefully you guys are all doing pretty good. It's been a couple of days since I last spoke to you all, but hopefully all of you guys are safe, happy, and healthy, and enjoying, the end of June and the beginning of July. So with that being said, now that we got our lovely introductions out of the way, we're gonna jump right into our episode today. So like I said, we're gonna be covering episode 2 of season 2 of House of the Dragon. So obviously that aired last Sunday on the 23rd, which was my birthday, by the way. Um, and I think out of 10 sons, to be completely honest, I'd probably give it, hmm, I think I'd probably give it like a 10 out of 10 sons, to be honest. I mean, I really haven't seen anything in this show so far, or at least this season, to be honest, that has really warranted any negativity or any criticism, at least on behalf of my part. I obviously am a Game of Thrones fan. I am a House of the Dragon fan. I'm not a huge, extensive like lore reading fan, but I really do enjoy it. And like I said, in my personal opinion, I really haven't seen anything this season so far that's bothered me. So I think this was another perfect 10 out of 10 episode. This episode in particular definitely heavily covered more of the Greens. I mean, obviously we see, Team Black and some of the characters in that group, but we see that this is a very Team Green heavy episode, and with good reason. I mean, obviously we saw in episode one, towards the end, that we had the very infamous blood and cheese moment, where the two men infiltrated the Red Keep to potentially assassinate Aemon Targaryen. Um, from the behest of Daemon Targaryen. But when they could not find Aemon Targaryen, they ended up finding the queen and her two young children. And at the end of the day, it was a son for a son, and the two men murdered Aegon II's youngest son or only son, Jaehaerys Targaryen. And that's how the episode ended, obviously. Very infamous in the book, because there is a book that basically goes over all of the Targaryen history, called Fire and Blood, and it's definitely one of those like moments where you're reading it, you're just like, ooh, like, wow, that's kind of dark. The scene was like phenomenally shot. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me, sorry. The scene was really well shot. I mean, I really love how the camera just panned with these two men the last 15 minutes. The actress that played Helena, she did a fantastic job in her role, and it was a really good episode. It was. But moving on to obviously this episode, this episode's obviously going to pick right up where we left off. So obviously we see the Red Keep is in shambles. The guards have been alerted. Everybody's being evacuated from the keep, and obviously we see Aegon II very upset when he hears about the loss of his son, obviously. And they do a really good job of portraying Aegon II as like a good father. From what you read in the books, it kind of gives you a little bit of a different picture. Keep in mind, like, when you're reading the book, like these accounts are from like maesters that weren't even around during the events. So they're just like recording events that have happened like maybe a couple of decades. So they're putting their own like spin and twist like on certain characters and their personalities and events that actually happened. So the show is actually giving us a little bit of a different take when it comes to some of the characters and some of the events, by giving us like an actual firsthand account of like what actually happened versus what we're told in the books, such as Fire and Blood. Um, oh, excuse me, pardon me. So we see Aegon II as more of like a father figure. I mean, he is absolutely devastated. He is angry, he is hurt. I mean, the whole entire episode, this actor does a phenomenal job like portraying all the emotions. He's angry, he's upset, he's sad, then he wants revenge, then he's back to being sad. He does such a phenomenal job, like really stepping into that role and producing, the heartfelt loss of a father losing a son. Um, Now, his mother, or Jaehaerys's mother, on the other hand, Helena is an interesting character because she definitely is a little bit disconnected. She doesn't do a really good job of showing her emotions. But we see that she tended to like shut down this episode. I mean, her character definitely was a little in the spotlight a little bit in this episode. Obviously, she's grieving the loss of her son, so she's kind of being isolated. She's remote from other people. We see that she has, the scene with her mother, where Allison tells her that they want to throw a procession for Jaehaerys, so they could, basically walk in through the streets of King's Landing on the way to the Dragon Pit, um, for the public to see, so they could see that this is the work of like, a mad woman, and someone that, should not be heir to the Iron Throne, basically. So they basically used Jaehaerys' death as like a propaganda, which, on paper is very unfortunate, and obviously it sounds messed up. But for the time period and especially for the circumstances in Dance of the Dragon so far, it actually was a pretty smart move by the hands of Otto Hightower, and the small council of Team Green. By using this child's death as more of a political propaganda move, it helps them secure the loyalty of the citizens of King's Landing and helps gain popular support for Aegon II and his family instead of Rhaenyra and her family. um, so yeah, so we see that that's going on, and again, we see Allison, because she's it's hard to find the words for her. But she definitely is a very interesting character. I mean, again, we see that she kind of like secluded herself. And then she doesn't understand like why they have to go ride in the carriage, and she doesn't want to, and she doesn't want to interact with the people. And we see the scene where Allison is basically like, well, unfortunately, this is just how it works. I mean, I'm, the Queen Dowager, you're the queen. I mean, this is just how royalty and politics work, and we have to do this. Um, and it transitions, oh, excuse me. It transitions, slowly to the scene of the carriage and the procession, going down the streets of King's Landing. It was really lovely shot. I mean, everything looked fantastic. But then again, you could also see the disconnect between like, the royalty and the people that are, running Westeros and, just the simple population. Especially when, one of the carriages gets stuck in like a pothole, and then, the crowds of people start swarming the carriage, and you see like, Helena get really uncomfortable. And again, it's just one of those like shock factors where it's like, she doesn't know these people, she doesn't know who they are. They're just constantly calling out her name. She's getting overwhelmed. She just lost her son. So, the amount of emotions that are going through her mind while she's, attending this event must be like, excruciating. And like I said, they do a really good job of like showing that disconnect where, it's almost like, the royalty doesn't want to be bothered. Like, they're doing it to win the love of the people, but then ironically, when the people don't want to love them, the royalty's like, no, 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 get away from me. Like you're ew. Like you're in the street, you have mud on you. um, but regardless, the scene ended. Like I said, really great scene. Um, and for about the next half of the episode, we're kind of just seeing how like everybody in Team Green is like taking the loss of Jaehaerys. Um, so we see like how Aemon Targaryen is dealing with it, obviously because he was the intended target of Blood and Cheese, and then obviously because he wasn't there, we see that he has a scene in a brothel, where he's basically just like confiding in like an escort, and he's saying that he feels really terrible for what happens, and especially he brings up what happened with Lucerys, at the end of season one of the House of the Dragon, and he basically exclaims that he let his temper get away from him, and he regretted how things went that far, and it shouldn't have happened, basically. Um, and in that sense, I think he's sincere. I mean, I don't know how he's going to, or how his character is going to play out for the rest of the season, but in that moment in particular, again, at the end of the day, all these people are like one big family. Um, so it wouldn't put it past me that he would actually be feeling some regret. I mean, that's his nephew, so I mean, I'm sure he's feeling some sort of guilt. But we see that he's dealing it in his own way. Where um, he's coming off as this like very sophisticated, macho, like military man, but he still has his like moments of vulnerability. So the writers and how the show is running, they're definitely, we talked about this a little bit last episode, but they're definitely playing the sympathy card for both parties. So you're starting to like kind of feel for Team Green, but then also continue to feel for Team Black. Um, Not in the sense of like, at least with Team Green, I don't think it's in the sense of like their cause. I just think it's in the sense of their characters. They're doing a really good job of like humanizing those characters. So you feel more for them, but not what they represent. Like if you could like separate them from what they represent, like I'm sure everybody would. But they're doing a really good job of making you sit there and be like, huh, like what is the right choice actually? Like who should be the heir to the Iron Throne? Um, Obviously when it comes to Aegon, we see that he wants revenge, he wants bloodlust, he wants to get after Rhaenyra, obviously, because he thinks that she's responsible. And he wants revenge, plain and simple. Um, and we see him slowly but surely like kind of take some authority. I mean obviously he is the king of Westeros, but he has for a long time been controlled by his mother, Alicent Hightower, and then as well as her father and his grandfather, Otto Hightower. And then we have the really nice scene of Aegon dismissing Otto as his hand of the king. and actually making Sir Kristen Cole his hand of the king, which is pretty interesting because not only is Kristen Cole head of the king's guard, but now he's also hand of the king. So I'm just curious to see like how that job title works. Um, and that scene in itself was really good. I mean, because we have in that moment like Otto Hightower basically realizing that, oh shit, maybe Viserys was right. Maybe we should have kept Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne because it's very reminiscent of Game of Thrones with like Tywin Lannister and like how he would treat like Joffrey Baratheon and like his grandchildren, especially Joffrey. I mean that those two scenes like are very similar where he was just like, oh my God, he's like, I can't believe this kid's on the fucking Iron Throne here. Like what is going on? Um, which is really interesting because in that moment we see that like Otto actually misses Viserys and he's like what it's almost like in that moment he's like what have I done? He's like did I do the right thing? Like should I be putting my family on the Iron Throne like or should I be helping out your daughter? Um um but yeah, I mean no it was brilliantly acted by all parties and again we're seeing that Aegon is now on this like war path, he's on this revenge path basically. And especially towards the end of the episode we see um where he's crying all by himself because again you got to keep up appearances, and you can't have the king just crying, about willy-nilly because then he'll be seen as like weak and scared and all that. So the only time he could really mourn his son is like in private. Um, and it is a really sad scene. It is because I mean we're seeing how devastated he is by the loss of his son, and then even when his mother comes in, she chooses just to leave him be and not comfort him. Which I'm curious to see what would have happened if she actually did comfort him in that moment. Um, but again, you see the disconnect there where she doesn't really know how to parent her children. Like, she back in season one, when she was like an adolescent, like, her job was to like basically seduce King Viserys and bear him like offspring. That way she could like set up her family in a powerful position of power, to take over the Iron Throne, pretty much. So she was used as a pawn by her father. Um, so technically, she never really wanted to be a mother, so to speak. So she never probably really learned how to be one. So even though her children are a little bit more grown and she could, probably empathize with them or sympathize with them a little bit better, we still see that she struggles from time to time to like really control her children or like even have a relationship with them. Um, we don't really see Helena too much for the rest of the episode, so we can kind of assume that she's again dealing with it like how she was dealing with it in the very beginning. I'm sure she is like basically isolating herself, doing her own thing, staying secluded, oh, excuse me, out of the public eye and out of sight, out of mind type mentality. Um, and I mean, even moving to technically Jaehaerys's like grandparents and like great grandparents. I mean, obviously Alicent was like devastated because on the night of the attack, we see that she was obviously busy with Sir Kristen Cole, and he was supposed to be guarding the Queen and her children that night. So she blames herself, and we see her like have this like constant internal struggle with herself where she blames herself and she continually like tells her father that like I have sinned, I've done a bad thing. She goes to I guess what's considered like probably like a sacred place, like the church of like the Faith of the Seven, and she lights the candles, and like you could tell that she's really broken up about it. Um, and she feels the same way as Helena. She's at first hesitant to ride in the carriage, but she ends up doing it anyway. Um, and again, we see that she blames herself, especially towards the end of the episode where she's speaking to her father, and then she wants to basically like tell her father like what happened. Like, she's basically like, Dad, I need to talk to you. And he's like, No, I don't want to hear it. So you see that like that whole family like kind of has some issues, to be honest, with like talking to each other or like just loving each other in general. Um, we see towards the end of the episode that like she takes her frustration out on Kristen Cole again. But they end up in the same situation they did at the end of the first episode. So they end up having sex again. So our girl Allison is like all over the place. She's feeling terrible. She feels ashamed. She's feeling bad. And then she's just jumping right back into bed with him. So I, I have no idea what she's doing at this point. Um, like I said, Otto Hightower really interested me this episode. Like I said, that scene where he was basically like, dismissed as Hand of the King, was really good, and I'm interested to see like what his character is going to look like, going forward. We see that he's going to be returning to Old Town, which is the seat of House Hightower, and we actually get a name drop towards the end of the episode. So Alicent and Viserys also had another child, so they had four four children in general. So they had Helena Targaryen, they had Aegon the Second Targaryen, they had Aemon Targaryen, and they had another boy by the name of Daeron Targaryen. So we see that he's been in Old Town. So we don't know why he's not in King's Landing or what's going on. Maybe the book explains it and they just haven't covered it in the show yet. But we see that he is back in Old Town where, House Hightower is from. So we see that he's been off screen, but now that they've name dropped him, most likely he's going to be making a live action appearance in the show. And obviously in the book, he plays a very big part in Dance of the Dragons. So I'm very curious to see how they're going to bring his character over from the books into live action. So that should be really fun and enjoyable to watch. Um, I think, pivoting away from Team Green, well, before we do, we should probably talk about, our Mr. Insecure guy and, little fuckboy in the show, Sir Kristen Cole. So obviously, in the same wavelength of Allison Hightower, he feels utterly responsible. Especially the scene where he's like watching them disassemble like Jaehaerys's bed. He sees like all the blood on the sheet and whatever. Like he feels responsible. Like he knows it's his fault. Like even if he wasn't supposed to be on guard duty that night, somebody should have been guarding him. So he feels responsible. And instead of blaming himself or admitting that it was his fault, he decides to take it out on the poor Kingsguard. And our boy, Eric there is just sitting there enjoying his dinner, and he basically just gets, branded by Sir Kristen Cole. But basically everything he's saying is what he would say to himself, basically. So he's basically just taking his anger out on somebody external instead of looking internally at his own mistakes. Um, so we see that after this like little spit that Sir Kristen Cole has with Sir Eric, he tasks Sir Eric to basically infiltrate Dragonstone and kill Queen Rhaenyra. Obviously, the twins, Sir Eric and Eric, are very well known in the books and just throughout the Game of Thrones community. So because they're twins, he would have a pretty easy job of infiltrating Dragonstone and assassinating the queen, which was the plan. Excuse me, my mouth is dry. Um, but yeah, so we see that that plan is developed obviously, and then we hear about the plan again later on when Aegon is discussing it with Sir Kristen and Otto Hightower. And then obviously that's where Sir Kristen is made Hand of the King. So he goes from banging the king's mom, right, uh, to letting the king's son die, back to banging the king's mom, and then becoming Hand of the King. I mean, this guy like has the easiest job in the world. I mean, like all he has to do is bang the king's mom, and I mean he's good. I mean he's the head of the king guard. He can send men to just go on suicide missions. He's the hand of the king, and he still gets to bang the king's mom. So it's like you love to hate him, but there are some instances where you're just like, okay, all right, I see you, I see you. But most of the time you hate him because he's just a terrible guy. um, and then that's pretty much like the coverage for Team Green. What I mean? So now that we talked about Team Green, let's move over to Team Black and see what they were doing. Um, so obviously we see that the Black Council, or Team Black Small Council have convened, and Rhaenyra is just finding out for the very first time that Jaehaerys was killed, and everybody is blaming her, and she's like, "What the fuck did I do? I was just sitting here on my throne. I didn't do anything." So they're trying to figure out like what is going on exactly, like how did this even happen? Like, she would never do this to Helena, like, that sweet poor girl. I mean, they are sisters. And obviously everybody knows that Rhaenyra would not do that to Helena. I mean, Helena is the sweetest person on the earth, and she didn't deserve that. but then everybody slowly like starts to pan towards Damon, and he's just kind of sitting there like all smug and everything. And then, at first we're seeing a little bit of like turbulence in her small council, because some people like in her small council are actually accusing her, and they were like, well, you were upset about your son, so maybe you did. And so we're seeing a little bit of like disunity with Team Black right now. I mean, their situation and their position was like incredibly damaged by this event, and people are starting to point fingers, and there's a little bit of like a loss of cohesion. Um, Towards the end of the meeting, obviously we see in Rhaenyra's eyes that she found out, who exactly killed, Jaehaerys, or who planned, this whole attack, and she knows it was her husband, Daemon. And then we see that, they have that very lengthy discussion, where we see Rhaenyra stand up for herself. She's not afraid to stand up to Daemon and call him out for when he does stupid shit, basically. And Daemon is a little bit of a wild card, for Team Black. He can't really be controlled. He makes up his own mind. He does what he wants to do. He does makes his own decisions. Um, so it's going to be curious to see where his character ends up, for the rest of the show, because obviously we know what happens, in the book, and how Daemon Targaryen ends. Um, but the show is playing it more in the sense of like he's like a wild card. Like nobody's heard from him. They have no idea where he is. They assume that he's in one location, but they don't know if he's actually there. So I'm just curious to see how they like ring him back in, or like how they just develop his character further, as the season goes on. But excuse me. Um, but so we see this disconnect, between Damon and Rhaenyra. Um, so obviously he storms off. So we see that there's some other characters that start to get a little bit more screen time. In the episode, like we see Baela Targaryen, who is Daemon's son, by way of Rhaenys and Corlys's daughter. I forgot her daughter's name. Lena, I think Lena Valarian was her name. So back in season one, Daemon ended up marrying Rhaenys' daughter, Lena, and her and two children at the time were living in Essos, in one of the cities. That's where we had the episode with the scene where Lena dies in childbirth, and she has Vhagar give her like a dragon rider's death and like basically burn her to death. So this is obviously her all grown up. So Baela is, I believe, currently engaged to Jacaerys, and she was instructed by Rhaenyra to basically just keep an eye on King's Landing. Let her know like if the Greens like start moving, basically like to be a scout. So we see that which is kind of ironic because she'd rather send somebody else's kid to do that instead of her own kid. So we can kind of see the selfish, but at the same time, like that's technically her stepdaughter, so it's like they are family. So I mean, she does obviously emphasize that air of caution, like when she's talking to Bela. So we'll see if that has any repercussions to what might happen tonight, in today's episode. Um, but yeah, I mean, looking at, basically Team Black and what is going on, I mean, most of the episode for Team Black takes place on Dragonstone. I mean, obviously we see Daemon take off on Caraxes, so we could assume that he's possibly going to Harrenhal, um, because that is where he was originally tasked to go, to basically excuse me, strengthen their positions, in the Riverlands, pretty much, by I guess occupying Harrenhal, or just making sure that they have their allegiance. Um, we see Rhaenyra, struggling with the fact that her like position was just kind of compromised, and she's a little bit on the back burner. So she's basically just trying to consolidate her forces, put together some sort of strategy and move forward. So we see that not only does she talk to Baela, but then she also talks to Massaria, who kind of helped Daemon like plan the whole blood and cheese incident. So we see that out of the goodness of her heart and the extension of terms that her husband made. She ends up letting Massaria go, only to find out that like because we see Massaria like walk down towards a boat, but then she sees Sir Eric come off of it. So I'm curious to see if like she stays, and she helps out the queen, or like if she continues to go on. So I'll be curious to see if she makes an appearance tonight. Um, and then for the rest of the episode, we just kind of see Rhaenyra like, you know, pacing back and forth, playing with her own children, just trying to figure out like what's going on and what she could do differently. Um, and you know, obviously we'll get to what happens later, but there's really not much else, from Rhaenyra in this episode. We see that she becomes a little bit more independent, she becomes more strong-willed, and she is trying to figure out, like I said, what she could do to like save her position or like bolster her position, basically. Um, when it comes to Rhaenys and Corlys, we see that they are very adamant in like protecting the queen and making sure that the queen like stays on the correct and current path. They're not really too concerned with Damon, and especially Rhaenys. She is kind of like the voice, or like I guess like the right, the hand to the queen. She's almost like the hand to the queen, and she swears that she will make sure that the queen like stays on path and everything, and stays on the correct trajectory. Um, and I believe me, don't quote me if I'm wrong, but I believe also this episode, we see um, another character appear by the name of Adam of Hull, I believe. Um, and he reunites with his brother at the dockyards. I don't know if this is on Driftmark or this is just somewhere that House Velaryon patrols. Um, but yeah, we see the brothers reunite, and obviously they're talking about like how one of them saved Lord Corlys, and they should get honored and stuff like that. And um, the reason why they have an emphasis on this character, and then we even see him a little bit later on in the episode where he's like picking up like crabs like on the beach, and he sees the dragon sea smoke fly ahead. And the reason why we're focusing on this character is that these two characters that we saw, so the bald guy from the first episode, and now this guy from the second episode, they are actually the bastard children of Corlys Velaryon. Um, so they have not been recognized as, Velaryons. So they probably have some sort of bastard names. Um, but they do have, Targaryen blood in them. And we do know that these two sons eventually join up the cause for Team Black, and they become instrumental figures in the Dance of the Dragons. So this is their way of kind of like teasing how or what role they're going to play for the rest of the season and for the rest of the show. So that was really interesting. And I'm trying to think if there's anything other Team Black we should discuss before we start talking about the small folk and whatnot. I think that's pretty much it, really, to be honest. I don't know if it was this episode or I think it was this episode. We have a nice moment between Jacaerys and I don't remember the other daughter's name. It's not Bela. It's the younger one, the one that was married to Lucerys. We see her like practicing a crossbow, and we see them talk about fathers. And basically, if nobody knew. It's basically confirmed that, obviously everybody knows that, Sir Harwin Strong was actually the father to Rhaenyra's children. They were he is the father to Joffrey and Lucerys and Jacaerys. Um, and we have a nice sweet moment where, Jacaerys talks about his father and her uncle, Laenor Velaryon, who we saw fake his death at the end of season one to go run away to Essos with his lover. And he was bringing up like fond memories and things that he learned from that father. And then we also, hear words about Sir Harwin Strong and, sweet words about him as a father. Um, and it's just a nice bonding moment between the siblings, just kind of like reminiscing about their parents and like, what they would think or what they would say. And it just really goes to show you that this is children fighting their parents' war, and that these two kids have already lost so much. And, they're just almost like pawns, in their parents' games, which is unfortunate. I mean, of course they're going to support their parents no matter what, but at the end of the day, you got to realize that these kids are like probably not even 18 yet, and they're already like flying on dragons and like fighting battles and you know dying. So it was a very nice moment. It was a nice change of pace, for once, just to kind of like avoid everything and then just go have a nice conversation on the side of a cliff. Um, Now, this brings us to just a quick little conversation on the small folk, because obviously the small folk was a big focal point in this episode. How do we win over like, the population? How do we get them on our side? So we see that the episode starts with obviously the procession for Jaehaerys, them winning over the people of King's Landing to their side, with a very nice funeral. But then towards the end of the episode, we have like Aegon do a complete 360, and we see that he basically murders every single rat catcher in King's Landing because he finds out that one of the men responsible for his son's death was a rat catcher. So instead of like doing an investigation and actually finding the person that's guilty, he just killed all of them. He ended up killing the guy that helped kill his son, but in turn, he killed a bunch of innocent people too. So we don't really know where the small folk stands when it comes to Aegon right now. I mean, they felt bad for him with the loss of his son, and now they just found out that if anybody they knew, family, friends, lover was a rat catcher, that they died. So he just killed innocent people in retaliation. Not only that, but we do see another character by the name of Hugh Hammer, who was the blacksmith from episode one, return to his wife and child, and talk about the promise of gold and money, and just basically what the condition is of King's Landing. Like food is getting scarce, materials are getting scarce, people are jacking up prices. People are just dying left and right. So we're seeing that like the streets of King's Landing and the population there is like almost like at the tipping point or the breaking point, basically. Um, and we see him have a little bit like a more of an optimistic approach where he's like, oh well, don't worry, the king promised us more gold. And then his wife was like, well, do you have any idea like when this new gold is going to come or whatever? And he obviously had no answer. So I'm curious to see like what's going to happen with his, because they seem to be putting a light on his character, and I think his character is a pivotal part of Dance of the Dragons. So I'm just curious to see um what role his character is going to play, or like how they're going to keep introducing his character further. um and then we finally get to the big climax, like at the end of the episode, where we see Sir Eric or Arik. I don't remember which one's which, to be honest. We see him infiltrate dragons excuse me, we see him infiltrate Dragonstone. Obviously, like I said earlier in the episode, we saw Massaria kind of stop and do like a double take, and she was almost like, "Wait, didn't I just see you like a second ago?" Um, so I don't think she necessarily helped out in like alerting, or maybe she did. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we'll see in this episode that she was the one that got the brother, or something, and helped like prevent the assassination attempt. But regardless, we see him make his way onto Dragonstone, and we kind of have this like cool like cat and mouse game between him and his brother, where like one is staying out of the earshot of the other, and he's kind of like skulking around the castle, like trying to find like where Rhaenyra is. He eventually cuts off some escape routes, and then we see him kind of blend into the King's Guard. He offers to stand guard at Rhaenyra's door, and then that gives him obviously access to the bedroom. And then this is where obviously his brother barges in, and we see a very cool but also tragic fight scene between brothers, because the tragic part of it is that they both still love each other, very dearly, even though they chose different sides of this conflict. And at the end of the day, it hurts just as much for them to fight each other, as it does, basically leaving each other. And we see that towards the end of the duel, obviously one of the brothers is victorious, and after realizing that he just killed his brother and how heartbroken he is over that, he ends up killing himself too. So at the end of the episode, we have both of these brothers perish, at their own hands, basically. Very sad and tragic downfall, to both of these beloved characters. Surprisingly, like I actually thought this was just like one guy playing two characters, but they are actually twins in real life, which is really cool. So I'm sure that was kind of special, to be like brother actors to play this part with each other. I'm sure, that's where a lot of the raw emotion and talent comes from, because you could obviously see it on the actors' faces, when they're doing the scene. But yeah, so we see that happen and go on. Um, and that's basically kind of how the episode ends, to be honest. The episode just kind of ends with, the end of that fight. And yeah, and then it kind of cuts to black, and that's pretty much it. Um, so like I said, obviously, the third episode comes out later tonight, in about, by looking at my clock right now, probably about 40 minutes or so. So we did see in the trailer that it looks like, part of the Green Army or just, Aegon's forces are on the march and leaving King's Landing. So there could be a possible battle in tonight's episode. A lot of people are speculating that it's going to be the Battle of, I think, Rook's Nest it's called, or Rook's Rest. And if it is, it's going to be a very sad episode. It's going to be a very tear-jerky one. So I'm sure we will be discussing it in a couple of days when I do my episode on episode three. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, this was a solid episode. 10 out of 10. Like I said, I really like how they are continuing to like individualize and humanize like each of the characters from these two factions. And like I said, just really great work so far of what they're doing and everything. And like you said, I when it comes to Team Green, I still don't like them, but this show is definitely making me like sympathize with the individual. And it's just really interesting to see them cut to the individual character and let them have their moment, and then like go back to the broader conflict. Which is making this just so much more tragic, because you're getting to know each of these characters on like an individual, like personal level, and then like you're seeing them get engulfed in the over larger conflict, so it hurts you just as much. Like if one of them was to die or, get wounded or whatever, you kind of go on this journey with them and then you see their ultimate end. Um, and there's going to be plenty more of that throughout this season, and then the next season, and however many seasons it takes to finish the story. Um, but yeah, that will be pretty much it for today's episode. So like I said, I'm not sure how long this will be. These reviews are relatively shorter because it's just me kind of expressing my thoughts and opinions on the episode and what I liked and what I disliked. Um, so, these usually are around like 35, 40 minutes. So like I said, you guys seem to really love the first one. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. I was like almost shocked when I saw it had like almost 100 views on YouTube. So I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys are thinking about the season so far, what you hope to see. What do you think about the characters and the story and whatnot? And let me know if you're going to be watching episode three. Obviously, by the time this uploads, episode three will already be out. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you are looking to find where you could find this lovely podcast, as well as all of our social medias and just where to follow our content in general. You could find us on YouTube at Two Sons Podcast. That's with an O, not a U, because we're two brothers. You can also find us on Spotify at Two Sons Podcast as well. So YouTube is, for you visual and audio listeners, and the Spotify is more for you audio listeners. So pick your poison, and we always appreciate the support nonetheless. If you want to find us on our socials, we are going to be on Instagram, uh, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, all under Two Sons Podcast. Again, that is with an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. We are also on TikTok at Two Sons YouTube. So check us out on there as well, which is where I do most of the posting and whatnot. My brother said he was going to be posting some stuff on the socials, so be on the lookout for that. Like I said, this episode will be available on YouTube around noon time tomorrow. So please check it out at your leisure. Give you guys a nice episode to open up your week with. And yeah, again, thank you guys for coming out to another wonderful episode of Two Sons Podcast. I'm having a lot of fun doing this mini series, to be honest. So let me know if you guys are enjoying it too. I love talking about House of the Dragon and just talking about different topics on the podcast besides Star Wars. I mean, we all love Star Wars here. I mean, that's why you guys come and watch us. But it's always nice to kind of like branch out from the obvious topics and go into other genres that we like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Marvel, Disney, etc., etc. So thank you guys for coming out. It really means a lot. we will be continuing our Acolyte series, so do not get discouraged. Hopefully I can get my brother together this week, and the two of us can do an episode together. So by the time we get together, we'll probably be doing an episode on our reactions to episode 4, 5, and 6. So it'll probably be definitely a longer one. So be on the lookout for that. Episode 5 was actually really good for the Acolyte. So we'll see if that direction continues or if it just kind of goes back downhill. So let me know what you guys think about that in the comments down below. Before I take up more of your time, again, thank you for coming out to another wonderful episode of Two Sons Podcast, where we talked about and broke down episode 2 of season 2 of House of the Dragon. So, like I said, there's really nothing to say to kind of close out this episode. No special like Game of Thrones like language or lingo. Like May the Force be with you for Star Wars. So until we see each other all in the next one, please be safe. Don't do anything stupid. Have a great day, great morning, great afternoon, great evening. Please stay hydrated. And if I don't talk to you before the 4th of July, because the July 4th is on Thursday. Have a very happy 4th of July and 4th of July weekend. Celebrate with your family, friends. Please be safe. Be responsible. Don't do anything stupid. Um, and yeah, again, thank you guys for coming out. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye for now.